Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Lifting the Veil podcast with myself, your host, Adrienne Lopez, Integrative Healing Coach. Thank you for joining me today for soul healing conversations, topics, and guests that support you in unveiling the true nature of your consciousness so you can embrace your destiny and not suffer your fate. If you hear something today that resonates with you, please don't forget to like, share, comment, and or subscribe, as it really supports the growth and reach of this podcast by increasing our listenership, which makes this whole endeavor possible. In the meantime, please sit back and relax and get ready for this week's episode entitled Layered Rhythms. We'll get started in just a moment. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Lifting the Veil podcast with myself, your host, Adrienne Lopez, the Integrative Healing Coach. Today I wanted to speak with you and share some musings, some realizations that have been bubbling up in me, emerging through my recent work in several different contexts, which I'll share more as we go. But it's around the theme of layered rhythms. And it's so interesting to me how the themes in my life have been like layered rhythms. Like there's a bigger pattern of the trestle board, let's say, that's been emerging. And sometimes I get to see a glimpse of it unfolding. I see the higher order and design that I didn't even know that I was housing. Like it's like something that my particular imprint as a soul has wanted to land here on the earth in this lifetime. And I think that we all have some version of that. This is just that our current access to consciousness has kept that kind of hidden from many people. And so the more that I do this work, the more that I settle in to my own being and my own sense of returning to the quintessential essence of who I am, the more not only do I recognize it, but I embrace it and start working with it intentionally as a co-creator. Now, I would invite you to imagine how different your life would look. And sorry, there's a little bit of construction outside my window, so if you can hear it, my apologies. Hopefully it's just a short little window. But I'd like you to imagine that how your life would look, perhaps have unfolded differently. Not that anything's wrong with your life or how it's unfolded, but I just invite you to play along with me, let's say, in this activity of imagining how your sense of self, your personality, how you connect to other people and your work and your relationships and all that you love in this life, if you had been referred to or called yourself or seen yourself as a co-creator, that you are active co-creator with the fabric of life. And for those of you that have listened to my podcast or watched any of my social media may know that that I take great delight in synchronicity and symbols and visions. It's almost like intelligence, like life intelligence itself, whatever you want to call it, creator, source, knows that I take great delight in these things and is often presenting me with this opportunity to see these alignments as like a little wink or a confirmation, like, yeah, you are not mistaken, Adrienne. There is a higher force unfolding in your life. In fact, you are that higher force who might not always be conscious of your impact, your power. And so I I come to you today with this topic. And so I want to share with you my story, what's unfolding in my life in these different layers, in hopes that it will be a mirror or a lens for you to start thinking about your life in a way that might perhaps be a tinge more magical, more creative, uh, more orchestrated than you could have even imagined. There are things that happen to us, things that we can't foresee, like breaking your leg or having an illness or other more perhaps impactful things um, that we just our conscious mind doesn't see coming, and we think to ourselves, why would I have created that in my life? And this is the question, right? Why would we create that? Why did I create a home where I became the space holder of my family's emotions but could never talk about it? How could I choose a setting that was so beautiful and naturally gorgeous to grow up in, but yet be emotionally fearful and disconnected from spirit in a way, like choose a family that was disconnected or unconscious from, on one level, not all levels, right? But some levels of being able to name what was present in the space and their phobias and fears. And we all have some version of this, right? All families at this time on this planet have um, cultural imprints which have caused dysfunction in our biofield. And so this is the theme of how these layers of our being get distorted and restricted and cut off and disconnected and fragmented. And that's really what I'm doing as an integrative healing coach. No matter what mode or practice or medium that I'm using, the big goal is, how can we build our capacity to hold space for our experience exactly the way it is, exactly the way it's not, with compassion and love and welcoming. Because when we can do that, we can create that sense of allowing and permission to be with our experience. Um, we create more and more spaciousness for others to do the same that are around us. So, um, I'm going to just go back a little bit on the timeline of my life. And many years ago, as I mentioned in some of my posts recently, that I just went to the UK to have a reunion of a quarter of a century, 25 years, with people that I had lived with and attended university with in Swansea, the University of Swansea, and then also at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. I had spent 2 years there, completing my degree, my master's degree on cultural studies, the history of Western philosophy, and the construct of the self, really. And because that's where I was in my learning curve, and I was trying to do it through the mind. I was trying to do it through academia because that was what was available to me at the time. And I learned lots of things, but one of the most powerful things that I learned was that the mind is only one layer of this rhythm that we call life. And it has certain strengths and certain, like it has a range of use. And it can only exist in that range, energetic range of application. And it is a tool. But the place that I was wanting to travel, the mind, that bandwidth of information that was accessible through thoughts and ideas and concepts, wouldn't take me there. And that's what I learned. But while I was there, I also read so many incredible philosophical texts where I witnessed great minds trying to do the same thing and perhaps never noticing. Like, I wonder how many philosophers realized that their words were only pointing to experience. They weren't actually the experience itself. And so at that time, ironically, on the other side of doing this incredible like mental gymnastics and reading the history of philosophy, which was so intense, I also began, for the first time in my life, a meditative practice where I just happened to meet the most extraordinary meditation teacher that I could have ever imagined. And the experiences that I had in his meditation, sitting in his meditations, were what buoyed, like they carried me through my master's program. And there were hardly any words at all being used in this meditation. It was all an energetic transmission that happened. And my mind couldn't understand what it was. And it was kind of just a relief, actually, to be held in what I can call nothing other than pure unconditional love. And it's food. It's food for one's soul. And I didn't know what to call it. I just know how it felt. And for a long time, after I left Scotland, finished my degree, came back to the States, I became disillusioned because I wondered if that had all been a dream, if it was something I had just imagined. And so I kind of became real cynical after that. And I kind of became like, got a level of cynicism and hopelessness of like, get real, Adrienne, just get real about this life and what's required. And, you know, these beautiful aspirations and idealism and dream energetic aspects of being, I kind of just let them go. I mean, part of me did, right? There was always part of me that was still underneath those layers of the conscious mind, still holding on to that resonance that I experienced as a level of reality. But I'll never forget, there was one text that I read as I was writing my master's thesis, funny enough, on the construction of identity from a feminist perspective in regards to the pre-verbal. There was a text I read called The Layered Rhythms, and it was a nod to a Russian theorist who would talk about the dialectic, I should say, the dialectic between the nonverbal and the verbal. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that was like a philosophical attempt to address the biological, physiological impulses that are actually a layer under all of our speaking, all of our thinking, all of our doing. And for the most part, for many people, they're unconscious. But all you have to do is look at babies, to look at a baby, to observe a baby, and you see that that this consciousness exists before ideas. It's pre-verbal and it's non-verbal. It's only that we get language when we begin to interact in this system where we have sounds that are, pretty arbitrary to symbolize a energetic imprint or information. It's a code. And so this coded system, which we call language, is perhaps one of the most highest layer of all the layers that make up who we are. And this idea isn't new, right? As a student, right when I started doing my meditation, I started practicing yoga on a regular basis. And as a yogic student, as a student of the yogic text, the Yoga Sutras, the the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedic texts, Patanjali, we see that the traditions, the Eastern traditions, already had a whole language for the layers of our being, these layered rhythms that we have. And what has happened in the West is that we have been disconnected from these layered rhythms to where they're actually often in conflict. And so this is like this amazing renaissance of this language of coherence between the mind and the heart. And it's not just the mind and the heart. It's, in yogic texts that we have 5 different bodies. And yoga, to be equally yoked, that's what the word means, to be in union. Means bringing all of those layered rhythms of ourselves online consciously so we can create a coherence in our biofield. And so what happens when there's disconnects in the rhythms of our being creates internal conflict. We have our own energy working, our own life energy working against itself. And this is it's a result of many, many things. But part of the work that I'm doing recently as really diving in deep to creating fields, amplified fields where people can accelerate their healing journey. Because when we have one consciousness, that's powerful, but when we bring 2 or more gathered with the same intention to create coherence in our own nervous systems and the nervous systems of others, we create a container to be held, to do this work intentionally on purpose. So this is my next learning curve as a coach, and that's why I'm investing in myself and doing this year-long field facilitator training. And it is a study or an experiment on what happens when we bring all of those rhythms, all those layers of ourselves in a coherent rhythm. That is a fundamental energetic state change on all levels of our being. And it's, for many have had these experiences, right? You may have had this when you're out in the ocean and something in your consciousness is in awe of the beauty that you're being surrounded. It's almost unreal. When I say unreal, I mean it's in counter to what the mind believes about self, because all of nature is coherent, unified rhythm. Even when there appears to be a rupture, even the ruptures are part of the coherence, part of the coming to the fullness of our rhythm. And the ruptures are necessary because without the distinction, without the contrast, it's hard to tell. And so These are called peak experiences, and you can have them out in nature. You can have them when you see your brand new baby and holding in your arms, when you look or gaze into your lover's eyes, and suddenly the wall of self drops, and you begin to become aware of your own consciousness, observing its own experience that goes beyond the intellect, and then we get to land into our heart. And so instead of having these moments be fleeting or somehow surprising, like how did that happen, and will I ever feel that way again? Like when I was first meditating, and I had these huge expansive experiences in the meditation hall with my meditation teacher, feeling intoxicated with um, this this state of unconditional love. And I began, it had been so expansive and so unbelievably yummy that when I landed, I contracted way back into wondering if that ever existed. And so, my friends, today what I really am here to share with you is that we live in a range of layered rhythms. And sometimes those rhythms are discordant, conflicting, ruptured, disconnected, fragmented. And then there are times, seemingly out of nowhere, when all of them come back online and we have these amazing peak experience, what I call like a verticality, where everything lines up and we feel this amazing connection, unification, expansiveness, and then just like that, it disappears. And so what if, and it's not just something that I'm suggesting out of the blue, right? This is arising across the field of consciousness itself at this moment. How do we intentionally create these states, these peak states, or what we've called peak states, as our everyday experience of connection? And what would that mean for our reality? I want to say the mainstream reality, if we were able to begin to consciously shift the quality of our consciousness moment to moment, bringing all of those rhythms and layers together in a beautiful harmony of unification. Like what if it's just waiting for us? It was just waiting for us to understand and to realize that this isn't just a pipe dream. This isn't something that just accidentally happens. Just for example, when I first began meditating, I automatically gave my power to that meditation teacher, thinking, oh, it must be something in him. And it probably was something in him, but it was also something in me, because we are not separate. And perhaps it was just the fact that he had already known this. He had known it for me, so I didn't have to know it for myself until I could actually hold it in a way that was, until I had the space to actually hold that possibility for myself. And it's just a matter of ripening on the vine, right? Consciousness has to ripen. It has to be prepared to receive this level of reality as a possibility, as something that actually exists, as soon as we open ourselves to tuning into it. And so most recently, I am in the process of creating what I'm going to be calling a somatic sharing circle. We already have the intellect, the conceptual level down really well. So that's not what the circle is going to be about. Although we use that level when language, also reintroducing ourselves to the other layers that are outside our linguistic range. For example, the sensations in our body, whether they're rising internally or our sensory perceptions that are coming in through our senses, our impulses, our emotions, all of this myriad of the sea of data that's coming into our being that we have had to dismiss or shut out or push into our unconsciousness, and how that actually produces the incoherence that is required for us to be fully embodied into the range of our humanity, like the fullness of our humanity. This felt sense that goes beyond language, which is, simply put, the experience of a self, of consciousness being embodied, and what that means into our own relational, the quality of our own relational ways of connecting with other human beings in a way that works for ourselves and the planet for the utmost good of all involved. And so this is what I'm referring to as the layered rhythms. I know that there is a dance style or practice called, I think it's called layered rhythms. I've forgotten now. So I'm not meaning to appropriate that name from the dance. But that is a really good example of how the body is being called to move for no good reason except that it is alive, and that is good reason enough. That it wants to be expressed, and it wants to be moved, and it wants to be seen, and it wants to be felt, and it wants to be shared. That impulse of contribution and giving is the the root of our humanity. And so it allows us this way of approaching our experience to create environments, climates, places of shared living that invite all of us, and not just the part that is right okay or expected, because that creates a deep sense of isolation and alienation, which so many people are suffering from, and the effects of that, which shows up in many different self rejecting ways, through addiction, through violence, through abuse. And I don't know about you, but I personally, as I mentioned in one of my posts this week, have witnessed, the deep suffering of people who have recently self-selected to leave the planet because their suffering became too heavy and too much. They were holding too much alone and didn't know that there was anything else available. And that, who am I that I was not sharing my gifts, my awareness, my knowledge, my practice with those people? And that's just even a greater motivator for me to share this work with people, because I see the possibility of its ability to liberate and free the burden and sense of obligation that people are holding without even knowing. And so many people suffering in silence, actually, thinking that something's wrong with them and petrified to let anyone know the shame and the guilt and humiliation that this disconnection is built on from a very young age, where we learn unconsciously that our expression, our expansiveness, our enthusiasm, our joy, our singing, our dancing is too much, right? Too inconvenient for our caretakers. And we are unknowingly shut down and taught through our interactions that we have to curate ourselves and cut ourselves up into acceptable pieces, and not to offend other people or upset them, as somehow we're responsible for their reaction. When in actuality, for the most part, our caregivers, the people that raised us, well, they meant well, were reenacting a system that they had been raised in as well, that they had submitted themselves to. They had become, as I mentioned earlier, resigned that this is life, so you better just grow up and just accept it and start living the way everyone else is living and get on with it already. Even if it's unfulfilling, even if it's life denying, even if it's repressive, it's what we got and we do it together, right? We suffer together. And what if that was all just one version of a reality? And it didn't even have to be that way, except that we chose it to be that way because we were learning to remember the magnificence and the possibility of who we are and how we can truly live when we become co-creators, active participants, to dispel outworn myths about what it means to be alive, to be fully alive on this planet for ourselves and others, and really for the expression of life that's wanting to move through us, to be known, to be felt. And that is pure source. The delight and the joy of it for itself alone, with no need to accomplish a final outcome where we can justify who we've been being. Like, what if it's just enough to be who we are for the pure joy and delight of the expression and the love of what we're bringing? So, my friends, I just was very inspired to share this with you. I'm excited about putting together my somatic sensing circle, sharing circle. I hope to have it up in the next, actually this month. I'm gonna have it up and going for a first round. I hope to create a monthly meeting, or maybe I'll do more like a 6 weeks. 6 weeks. I don't know. Let me know if you're here, you're listening, and you're listening to my words, and it sounds like something that you're interested in, that something piques your interest. What do you feel that's like more calling to you, more like more intense, like 6 week window, and then taking a break and then doing another session? Or would you like to do something just more like on a monthly basis? I'm so excited about it. So if you, if this is calling to you, I'd love to hear what you are taking away, what feels more energetically in alignment for you, and let me know. Leave something, comment. Leave some comments, let's say. And I want to thank you for being here and taking the time to listen to my musings in this solo cast this week. I've kind of been taking a break from the weekly grind of producing a podcast each week, mostly because I've been traveling and moving and exploring these new different learning edges. And I've just really given myself the permission and spaciousness to do that without having to be on this weekly production schedule. But I am in the midst of grounding into my new home and getting things situated, and hope to get back on the regular regular podcast production schedule and get some more inspiring guests on. And yeah, so I think I'll leave it there. If you if you feel called, please remember to like, share, or comment. It helps the listenership of my podcast grow, which I really appreciate. I appreciate your support. I appreciate you being here. And I just love hearing from you. And until next time, please remember what a valuable treasure you are. And bye for now.